was going through my last year at high school, feeling both excited and a bit uneasy. My days were pretty routine after school. I usually hung out at the local diner with friends or helped my younger sister with her homework at night. I had college applications waiting to be finished, and I often found myself daydreaming about a future that might take me far away from here, away from the boring routine of high school. Thursdays always felt extra long, as if time moved slower than usual. Today was no exception, with the same gray skies we always seem to have hanging over the town. I sat in the back of my calculus class, barely paying attention to the complicated math Mrs. Langley was writing on the board. Her voice mixed with the quiet buzz of the air conditioner and the sound of people moving their notebooks around, creating a background of boring, everyday noises. I excused myself to the bathroom just before the end of calculus class. Mrs. Langley just nodded without really looking as I left the classroom. The hallways were quiet, much quieter than usual. I was in the bathroom thinking about what I'd have for lunch and my plans for the weekend when a loud bang, unmistakably a gunshot, echoed through the building, making me jump. Before I could decide what to do next, the intercom suddenly made a loud crackling noise. A voice came through, sounding more serious than ever.
The school is now in lockdown. Emergency responders are en route.
As the announcement sank in, the seriousness of the situation hit me. Distant yelling followed, and then a loud crash, like someone slamming a door open. I started to panic. I rushed into a stall, locked it, and was just catching my breath when the bathroom door suddenly slammed open with such force that it echoed off the walls, making my heart jump. I heard quick, loud footsteps on the tile as someone hurried into the stall next to mine, breathing hard as if they were scared or had been running. I pulled my feet up onto the toilet seat and hugged my knees so no one could see me under the stall door. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Time seemed to slow down as I listened for clues about who it was and what they wanted. I could hear hard, ragged breathing that sent shivers down my spine. Whoever it was had certainly been running. For a moment, there was complete silence. The only sound was the drip from a leaky faucet, each drop echoing around the room and amplifying the tension. Every drip made me more anxious, terrified that any noise might reveal my hiding spot. The oppressive silence made me feel isolated and vulnerable in that small space. I shifted slightly, trying to ease the discomfort in my cramped legs, but then my eyes caught sight of something dark spreading on the floor. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what it was. Blood. It was slowly seeping under the stall wall from the next stall. My heart raced. Maybe it was another student who was injured, but I wasn't sure. I didn't dare say anything, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. The sight of the blood made the situation even more terrifying. As I sat there, holding my breath, I suddenly heard a muffled voice, whispering urgently. The person was on the phone. I strained to listen, every word sending chills down my spine.
Fuck, the cops are everywhere. I'm bleeding and stuck in a school bathroom. What the fuck do I do?
My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just another student. This was someone dangerous, someone the police were actively chasing. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My legs started to hurt from sitting so tightly squeezed. I tried to move a bit to feel less pain, but I lost my balance and my foot knocked against the toilet paper dispenser, causing it to rattle loudly. The noise broke the silence completely. Right away, the man stopped talking, and I heard the sound of movement, shuffling and the slight scrape of shoes against the tile floor. Before I could react, I saw a pair of eyes peeking from under the stall wall. The man's face, pale and smeared with blood, stared directly at me. His eyes were wide and frantic, filled with a mix of pain and desperation. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a cold sweat break out all over my body. Then, instinct took over. I reached up, unlocked the stall door, and burst out of the stall. I didn't look back. My only thought was to get away. I sprinted towards the bathroom door, my footsteps echoing off the tiles. I bolted into the hallway, my heart racing, my eyes scanning for any sign of help. The school felt like a maze, each hallway stretching endlessly before me. My lungs burned, but I forced myself to keep running, adrenaline propelling me forward. Rounding a corner, I nearly collided with a group of armed officers, their faces serious and focused. The sight of their uniforms was a relief so intense, it nearly brought me to my knees. I pointed at the bathroom, showing the officers that the man was inside. The officers exchanged quick, determined looks before rushing past me, their weapons raised. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath, my entire body trembling. The realization of how close I had come to danger sank in, making me feel lightheaded. From the safety of the hallway, I watched as the officers stormed the bathroom. That's when loud gunshots broke the silence. Each shot made me jump, and I felt really scared. I covered my ears with my hands, trying to block out the frightening sounds. The gunshots continued, and I was scared that a bullet might hit me even from where I was sitting. The shooting stopped as quickly as it had started, and then everything was quiet for a moment. I could hardly hear the police shouting orders because of the ringing in my ears. Their voices sounded far away. An officer came to me and asked if I was okay, then walked me back to the classroom. When I got back to my classmates, I felt the heavy impact of everything that had happened. I was thankful to be safe, but it was unsettling to realize how quickly things could have changed. We stayed in the classroom for what felt like forever, while the police secured the rest of the building. Eventually, they let us go home, and my parents came to pick me up. Later, we found out from the police that the man had just robbed a nearby convenience store and, in desperation, had run into the school to hide from the pursuing officers. The gunshot I heard was from the initial confrontation between the man and the cops inside the school building. When they cornered him in the bathroom, he started shooting wildly at the stall door, trying to scare them off. He kept firing until he ran out of bullets. That's when the cops finally forced the stall door open and took him down. The next day, the school announced plans to improve security and thanked the police for their quick response. Although I felt relieved and grateful for the protection, I was still uneasy about how quickly things had become dangerous. The incident had shaken me deeply, and after discussing it with my parents, we decided it would be best for me to transfer to another school. I couldn't stop thinking about the incident and the man in the bathroom. His desperate face and frantic eyes haunted my thoughts. Reflecting on what happened, I realized the importance of staying alert and being ready for anything. It was a reminder that unexpected things can happen, even in the safest places. Moving to a new school gave me a fresh start, but the memory of those terrified eyes peeking from under the stall wall stayed with me forever. When I was 15, my family lived in a quiet suburb where nothing much ever happened. We had a routine, a comfortable, predictable life. I went to the local high school, kept up decent grades, and spent my free time hanging out with friends or binge-watching shows. Life was pretty normal. Today started like any other day. I woke up late, skipped breakfast, and barely made it out the door in time to catch the bus. Except, when I got to the bus stop, I realized I'd missed it. Great, just my luck. So I ended up walking to school. It usually takes about 20 minutes, and I hoped the cool air would wake me up. My path went through some really quiet streets. This morning they felt even emptier and scarier because of the fog. I was walking peacefully when I suddenly heard slow, dragging footsteps behind me, like someone scraping their feet on the pavement. A chill ran down my spine as the sound got louder. I turned around and saw a man across the street. He looked about 40, wearing a worn-out hoodie and jeans, his clothes hanging off him like they were too big. At first, I didn't think much about it. It was a public street, and anyone could walk there. But there was something deeply unsettling about him. He walked slowly, dragging his feet like it was hard for him to move, almost zombie-like appearance. His head hung low, and he wasn't looking at me, just staring straight ahead with empty eyes. I walked faster, trying to get rid of the uneasy feeling, but the dragging footsteps sped up too, never slowing down, never stopping. The street felt strangely quiet, and every sound seemed louder because of my growing fear. I looked back again, and this time his head was lifted a bit. For a brief, horrifying moment, our eyes met. His face was still blank, but there was something creepy about his stare that made my skin crawl. I turned back around and walked even faster now, my heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps kept following me, or at least I thought they did because I was so terrified. I could feel him behind me, like a dark shadow getting closer every second. The familiar streets now felt like a maze, each corner hiding possible danger. I had never felt more alone or scared. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The silence was deafening. I looked back one last time. He stood there, motionless, his eyes fixed on me. My blood ran cold, and I turned and ran, not caring about staying calm anymore. The only thing that mattered was getting away from that terrifying man who seemed to appear out of nowhere, bringing a sense of dread with him. Then, I saw my school ahead. Finally, a safe place. I hurried through the gate and dared to look back one last time. I could see the man still dragging his feet and walking straight ahead, not stopping or changing direction. He just kept moving forward, as if I had never existed. I went through my classes without any more incidents, but I was distracted, constantly looking over my shoulder and scanning the faces around. My friends noticed and asked if I was okay, but I just told them I was tired. Later, during my English class, something unexpected happened. We were in the middle of a lesson when the classroom door suddenly burst open. The same man from the morning stood in the doorway, looking messy and wild-eyed. Chaos erupted as students screamed and ducked under their desks. Our teacher, Mr. Adams, was clearly scared but acted quickly. His face was pale and his hands shook as he rushed to the door, pushing the man back with all his strength and slamming the door shut. He locked it and immediately went for his phone, calling the school office to report the intruder. The man didn't even react when Mr. Adams pushed him out. He just stood there, staring through the classroom window. The room filled with the sound of panicked breathing and stifled sobs as we hid under our desks, hearts pounding in fear. Almost immediately, we heard a lockdown announcement over the intercom. The school was now in lockdown, but it didn't last that long. Mr. Adams moved us to a corner of the room, out of sight from the door and windows. He whispered for us to stay quiet and still. We could hear the man banging on the door and see him looking through the window, but Mr. Adams kept us calm, saying help was on the way. Minutes felt like hours as we waited in fear. Finally, we heard the sounds of police arriving, and the banging on the door stopped. Through the small window, we saw officers escorting the man away from the classroom. He didn't resist or fight back. He just walked along with them quietly. Our teacher unlocked the door, and a police officer stepped in. "It's okay, kids. You're safe now," he said gently. He helped us out one by one, guiding us to safety. We were taken to the school gym, where counselors were waiting to talk to us and make sure we were all right. It turned out that the man had somehow managed to sneak into the school and was wandering the halls. The fact that he had followed me and ended up here was terrifying. I learned later from the police that he had been seen in the neighborhood earlier, acting strangely but not causing any immediate harm. The next few days were a blur. My parents were incredibly shaken by what had happened. They felt the neighborhood was no longer safe, and we talked about what to do next. We considered moving, but in the end, we decided to stay. They didn't want me to go through the trouble of starting all over again at a new school. Life continued, but I couldn't shake the lingering fear. I kept wondering why that creepy man had followed me. Late at night, I would lie awake, thinking about it. Maybe he hadn't specifically targeted me. Perhaps he was just not in his right mind and happened to follow me by chance. These thoughts made it so difficult to sleep at night. It was over, I know, but the fear of that day stayed with me. I'm a high school senior, and it all happened during finals week. You know how stressful that time can be. Everyone was buried in books, studying like crazy. I was no different, studying like a maniac to get into college because my future depended on these exams. The whole school felt tense, with kids walking around like zombies, eyes glued to their notes. The library was always crowded, and finding a quiet spot to study was really hard. I spent most of my time going between classes, the library, and my room, trying to learn as much as I could. Sleep was a luxury, and coffee became my best friend. The pressure was intense, and you could see it on everyone's faces, the stress, the exhaustion, and the desperation to do well. There were whispers about students breaking down in tears, rumors of kids preparing to cheat, and even a couple of fights over study spots. The stress was getting to everyone. On that Wednesday, I had history with Mr. Thompson. He was one of those teachers everyone knew for the wrong reasons. He was famous for giving unfair grades, liking some students and being harsh on others. It felt like he had a personal vendetta against anyone who didn't suck up to him. I hated that class. Every time I walked in, I felt sick to my stomach. His sarcastic comments and unfair grading made me dread every moment. Even his class couldn't hold my attention that day. My mind was fried from all the studying, and I was staring out the window, daydreaming about summer break and all the fun I'd have once finals were over. I could hear Mr. Thompson talking about some historical event, but his words were just background noise. Suddenly, I heard shouting from the hallway. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then the sound of something breaking echoed through the classroom, sharp and loud. Everyone in the class froze, looking at each other with worried faces. The shouting got louder and more frantic, like someone was really angry. Then there was another crash, even louder, like metal hitting the lockers. The sound was getting louder and louder with every minute. Each crash was followed by silence, broken only by the angry shouts that seemed to be getting closer. Suddenly, the lockdown alarm went off. You know, that loud noise that makes your stomach drop. Mr. Thompson's face turned pale, and he quickly told us to hide, turn off the lights, and be quiet. The seriousness in his voice made us even more terrified. My seat was right next to the window, so I quickly crawled under my desk, trying to make myself as small as possible. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. The school usually had security, but at that moment it felt like we were completely on our own. Then, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They weren't in a hurry, more like someone was taking their time, which was weird and creepy. I peeked through a small gap in the window blind, and that's when I saw him. It was a guy wearing a hoodie, with the hood pulled up so I couldn't see his face clearly. He was holding a baseball bat and looked pissed. I had no idea who he was, but he seemed dangerous. The guy suddenly started smashing lockers as he walked down the hall, yelling Mr. Thompson's name. The tension in our room went through the roof. Mr. Thompson tried to keep us calm, whispering that everything would be okay, but we could see the fear in his eyes. My heart nearly stopped when I realized the guy was heading toward our classroom. He stopped right outside our door. My breath caught in my throat. He tried the door a few times and then started banging on with the bat, shouting for Mr. Thompson to come out. He wasn't just angry, he was out for blood. He swung the bat at the windows, and glass shattered everywhere. The sound was deafening, and some of the girls in the class started crying. Mr. Thompson was standing behind his desk, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. He was holding the phone in his hands, probably talking to security or the school office. He kept his finger to his lips, telling us to stay silent. Usually confident, he now looked desperate as he mouthed, "Stay calm, stay quiet." He looked around the room, making sure everyone was hidden. Even though he tried to reassure us, his hands were shaking. He moved closer to the door, ready to act if needed, while trying to keep us safe. The tension in the room was intense as we all waited, barely daring to breathe. The guy outside started banging on the door harder, his shouts becoming more aggressive.
"Thompson, you coward! Come out here!"
he yelled, his voice echoing through the hallway. The sound of the bat hitting the door was deafening, making us flinch with each strike. Mr. Thompson quickly moved to block the door with his desk, shoving it against the frame with all his strength. The heavy desk scraped across the floor, creating a barrier, but we could still hear the relentless pounding from the hallway. The tension was unbearable. Behind me, I heard a soft sob. One of the girls couldn't hold it in any longer. The guy outside kept banging on the door, his voice rising in fury.
Come out, Thompson. I'm going to kill you.
His threats were chilling, and I could feel the fear in the room intensify. Suddenly, we heard the distant sound of security guards running down the hallway. The guy banging became even more frantic, knowing his time was running out.
You're dead, Thompson. You're all dead.
He screamed, his voice cracking with rage. Realizing the security guards were closing in, the guy threatened one last time.
This isn't over, Thompson.
He then bolted down the hallway, trying to escape before they could catch him. The guards chased after him, their footsteps echoing off the walls. I watched as they pursued him, their figures growing smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the darkness at the end of the hall. We all waited for what seemed like forever, the tension still thick in the air, before the security guards returned and confirmed that the guy had fled the school. They assured us that the police were on their way and that the school would remain on lockdown until they had secured the area. Later, we learned more about who the guy was. His name was Jordan. He was a student in another class Thompson taught. He often stood up for himself and argued with Thompson because he didn't like how he was treated, with unfair grades and constant bullying and humiliation in front of the class. Their fights got so bad that they had a big argument, which led to Jordan being suspended. He couldn't pass his finals, and this made Jordan feel humiliated and hopeless. He blamed Thompson for ruining his life and thought his future was destroyed because of it. On his way into school, Jordan even attacked one of the security guards, which explained the shouts and crashes we heard before the lockdown. The guard tried to stop him, but was surprised by the attack. Jordan hit the guard hard, leaving him with a bad head wound. The guard was taken to the hospital, but was expected to recover fully after getting stitches. I couldn't shake the image of Jordan's angry, desperate face from my mind. His eyes had been wild, filled with a mix of rage and hopelessness. It was a day none of us would ever forget. The feeling of vulnerability lingered, reminding us how quickly our sense of safety could be shattered. I also kept thinking about the danger Thompson was in. Jordan was still out there, looking for revenge. Thompson would need to watch his back, especially now. Even though Thompson was a bad guy, always unfair and mean, I didn't want him to be killed. The thought of what could happen next scared me. We all hoped Jordan would be found and get the help he needed. But until then, we were all afraid he might come back one day and finish what he had started.